You all asked for it. Here it is. The 2019 Contenders China predictions, preview, thoughts, general takes, whatever. Here we are. We're here. Playoffs. Who's going to win? Who's going to lose? General thoughts on the season. Because I know I've been pretty quiet about China. I know that I don't talk about it very much, and I don't normally predict them in any facet, and I'm just pretty timid on China overall. So I thought I'd unlock and show a little bit of my heart to you, because I try to keep it as bundled up as I can. Contenders China has a pretty clear place in my heart, and a lot of these Chinese teams do as well. But God, Guangzhou Academy is rough. As a narrative point in the last season that I worked, and I kind of checked out towards playoffs, but what I tried to leave the viewer with was that, yes, Alter Ego and, 666 Legend might not be the best teams, but they're putting their names out there for the academy teams that are eventually coming, and we have those academy teams now. Team CC has been in the league for a number of years now, and they do their thing, and they make playoffs at least. Now, if they're going to succeed at playoffs, God rest Orchid's little soul. He's in pack now doing about the same, to be fair, but, still be on the lookout for him. Team CC, Shanghai Academy, they do okay for themselves, right? And then you have Billy, who is somebody that I assumed was going to do much better than I expected them to, or do better than what they have done, and they haven't, if that makes sense. I assumed, in terms of how everybody laid out, I assumed Billy was going to take the role of Lingon this season. I thought that they had a very strong core that they built off of, and I thought they were going to massively over kind of perform what people expected them to. And they've been okay. I think they'll do fine in playoffs, but I want to see them tested a little bit more, because once we look a little bit farther into their match history, they do drop games. They do drop matches that you really shouldn't see them drop, and it's pretty bizarre. Another sibling in the academy team family is Guangzhou Academy. I mentioned at the start of the segment, Guangzhou. I wanted them to be better, and I wanted all these academy teams to kind of improve on China and big them up and make that region strong and really push the envelope on how good Chinese Overwatch can be, because it's a region that is constantly slept on. And we got a trials team, and that's disappointing, and that's a shame, because there's a lot of good talent out there. There's rosters you could build out there that aren't being built, and it's pretty sad. And then you have Lingon, which has been a bright spot that I personally didn't see coming all that much. I assumed that they were going to be kind of in the same vein of Billy. I assumed that they were going to just do fine. They would get into playoffs, and they wouldn't win, but they do okay for themselves, and they're leading the pack in Group B. Granted, is it weaker? Not really. They have two of the weaker teams in the league, but overall, Lingon has a very clear style, while rigid, very, good at it in general. I want to see a little bit more from them, but again, we'll get into that as we kind of predict the playoffs. But the academy teams, generally speaking, have been pretty successful. I'd like to see them probably sign coaches. I think that the reverse engineering LGD and how they just managed to find rosters or develop players in a way that they always time and time again succeed. I would kind of look at them and say, like, okay, what are they doing there? What's their coaching staff doing that we aren't? Can we actually buy their coaching staff? I'd love that to happen. I think T1W, I'd imagine, is probably going to get picked through. I think we've been saying that for years for many contender seasons that T1W is finally going to get their Overwatch League berth, and they haven't. I imagine maybe mid-season you might start seeing some of the Chinese teams pick through T1W, but I think their coaching staff has proven themselves, and I would like to see them at least move to an academy team and have some sort of resources there to be able to do this full time. Jumpcat and Extra, they're smart. They have a pretty good head on their shoulders, and they're kind of a mini version of Coach Ray for the Chengdu Hunters that has kind of quickly become one of the best coaches in Overwatch in history. It has time and time found success and been able to kind of reinvent the wheel and be successful with it to a degree. But you don't see him really fail all that much. And I think Jumpcat and Extra are very much in that same vein where they can invent the wheel, but they can also understand a standard meta and try to explain that to players and help teach that to players in a way that they can understand and execute on and do well with. I want to see them move. I think T1W is a fine idea. I think their players are going to get picked through. I think their coaching staff should be assigned elsewhere. And yeah, I think it's a pseudo academy team. I think you're going to see that team picked through. At least I hope so. But when it comes to the playoffs, I guess before we get to playoffs, we have to talk about the bottom 4 teams in the groups. So Group A, bottom teams, big time Regal Gaming, RIP, Moss 7 Club. We love and respect you. Alter Ego won a map. That's something. And then Guangzhou Academy and Team for Victory. Team for Victory, I have a bone to pick with you. You excited me last year. There was, I think it was Land Story Cup. You were out there doing some crazy stuff, pulling out quad DPS versus Lingon and beating LGD, I think it was, and beating Lingon. What happened? Now you have an Orisa one trick and I don't like it. It's this was not what I was promised. This was not what I expected from Team for Victory. I still think they'll probably make it through trials. Is there even going to be trials? I don't even know. I could just be speaking at a school here. If there is trials, I think they'll probably still make it out of trials. But maybe there's another just absolute powerhouse open division team from China. Hopefully they all don't just get banned for boosting. And then you have Guangzhou. What do you say about them? Just a disappointment. Very weird team. Improved towards the end, I will say. Like, started to look better, but absolutely all over the place. Coordination's a mess. Like, a lot of the death knells that you see in a lot of teams that kind of signal change happening in that team. Some major moves have to happen before that team actually finds success, because you're playing against teams that have been together for a while, and you're a team that not only speaks multiple different languages, but you're kind of a glorified bench. You have Nero and Only Wish, 2 players that I'm not entirely too high on, are sat here and just waiting for their time to move into the main roster. I don't know that it was all that well built. It's a shame because there's a little bit of talent. There is talent there, but it's just not pointed in the right direction or pointed in a direction at all. It seems completely all over the place, and something has to change with Guangzhou before they can win, right? But enough poo-pooing on the Poopy Academy team. We have some production value. We have a graphic to show. So we have predictions set in place, and I should have this up on my own monitor, but I don't, but it doesn't matter. I'll just full screen it on the second one. Bada boom. So we have LGE.Huya over 66630. Should be pretty easy. LGE has a very clear style. I do wonder if they can show anything else. They do have a rookie Korean player on their roster, ATD, as a listed DPS. If that player possibly might be able to play Diva, maybe move ATD to Zarya and Piggy to Diva. That could be a thing as well. I think they're going to need at least another look in this metagame as we continue through the playoff bracket. You'll start to see where I kind of bring that up. But I think they're going to need a little bit more than just the Sombra. I think the Sombra will get them well into the finals. But once they're there and once they're in Pacific Showdown, I think they're going to need a little bit more to do extremely well. I think they'll do well on their own, but to improve, I think I need to see a break from this heavy, heavy rigidity. But should be well enough to be 666 Legend pretty handedly. Again, Kami Haker, strong duo, even at a DPS meta, strong players. Molly Langsa has been hit or miss. I have seen him do well. I have seen him absolutely feed his pants off. Piggy and JMac, okay. I'm still pretty reserved on JMac. Piggy has been fine. Not really fine. Let's take a gander at some of these notes. They play around Haker, yeah, definitely. Kami, very, very good. Their coordination, I will say, I do remember their coordination being pretty not great at Next. Pretty lackluster. A lot of grabs being used when they shouldn't. JMac kind of moving in positioning wide, if that makes sense. So something that you saw in the Stage 1 finals was super punishing Vancouver for playing very split. So their main tank would play a little bit too wide and not just in a straight line, and he'd be able to kind of hit tipper shatters on the back line, on the clump that's moved just slightly to the left or slightly to the right. And you start to see that kind of meld its way into LGE's play just a smidge as of late. But with this new patch, with, you know, potentially different maps being drafted in the playoffs, we might be able to see a different look at LGE, but enough about them. They'll beat 666 pretty handedly. Team CC will take a game. I'm pretty confident in that. Billy, I have heard through the grapevines that some people think that Billy's going to win. I don't see that happening at all. Looking at their match history, right? Not only are they in like a pretty bad group, they're in a group with T1W, LGD, which isn't a terrible team, 666, which not great, Big Time Regal Gaming, and Alter Ego. There has been, surprisingly enough, a pretty clear parity between the two groups, but there's two very clear top teams in Group A, and it's T1W and Billy. Billy coasts through all of their regular season games. Week 1, 4-0ing TSL, beautiful. Week 2, 4-0ing BTRG, beautiful. They go into week 3. They play LGD, drop a game. They drop Assault. Still win, you know, convincingly, but they're dropping maps here, there, all over the place. Billy goes into week 4. Alter Ego, 4-0. Doesn't surprise me. Then they go into week 5. Then they play T1W and get clapped pretty hard, 4-0. Now, that's regular season. What's a little bit more recent? So we go into the next qualifiers, right? So Billy gets put into the Group A bracket with Team CC, LGD, and Runaway. Billy Gaming drops a map to Team CC. They drop Control. Volatile game mode. It happens. Let's move on. Billy drops a map, to LGD, and they drop King's Row. What's happening here? What's going on? They're dropping maps at every turn. I don't see them doing all that well. I do think they're very clearly the favorite when it comes to their match against Team CC in the quarterfinals. But Team CC is going to take some maps off of them. They're going to exploit them. I will say Team CC has had their issues this season, moving main tanks around. They got Fearless. They let go of, I think, Fallen. There has been shifts in the team. They always seem to do halfway okay in the regular season, and then playoffs hit and they kind of flounder. That's why I think Billy's going to succeed, at least here. But as they move forward in the semis, I think there's more of a question. LGD 3-2 over Flag Gaming. I don't like this Flag Gaming roster. It's not the same as last year. And that's not to say that you can't ever make changes. But I mean, I like Mask. I like LGE.Huya. I'm not big on Lai. I'm not big on Melons. To be completely honest with you, I haven't necessarily paid too much attention to them. But if you look at their match record, it's 4-1. Did they beat Team CC? Let's take a gander. Let's take a little look. See. Where did they play Team CC? What was the score? They played them in week 1. Now, in week 1, we also saw T1W drop 2 maps to LGD, so I wonder how prepared some of these teams were. Not that that's a massive excuse, but I think Flag is pretty clearly the underdog here. I'm willing to give them some leeway because I have heard good things, or at least, improvements when it comes to Melons and Lai. But I've been pretty impressed with LGD this season. I was pretty down on them last season. They're taking games where they shouldn't. They kind of play up to their opponent at times and can play down to their opponent as well. Their week 5 finisher was 3-2 against BTRG, which is pretty disappointing. But then a more recent game, they took a map off of Runaway, which is pretty big. Granted, I've heard through the grapevine that Runaway wasn't necessarily practicing all that hard for this match in particular. Getting a game off of one of the best GOATS teams in the world, at least in the Contenders level, pretty impressive. Taking a map off of Bilibili gives me room to have hope. And then you look at Flag. They're dropping maps to Guangzhou, or they drop a map to Guangzhou. They tie against LGE.Huya. They don't tie. They actually drop a map. There's not a lot of confidence there for me to predict Flag Gaming in particular. I think LGD has looked halfway decent all season, if not good all season. Taking games where you wouldn't expect them to. They somehow always seem to find a way. I think they're going to the semifinals. I have them 3-2 over Flag Gaming. For those of you who are listening on audio, which I might upload this to the podcast. I don't know. We'll see. I know we have T1W mopping the floor with Lucky Future. I don't think I need to go into too much analysis there. I think there are much more interesting games in the semifinals. So we'll go into the semis where, it's funny because I'm looking, this way? But my monitor is over here, and I should be looking this way because I'd be looking at the graphic, but whatever. So I have LGE.Huya 3-1ing Bilibili Gaming. Now here's why. Like I mentioned with Bilibili, they drop maps. They're a good team. I just think there's a very clear top 2. I hope that didn't come through on the mic. I think it probably came through desktop. Somehow I need to get that to go away. Windows updates, am I right? I think Bilibili drops games. I think they're an okay team, but I think there is a very clear top 2 in Contenders China, and that is LGE.Huya, and that is T1W. Can Bilibili upset? Yes. Do I think is it likely? Absolutely not. When we look at their matches in next, again, you constantly see them drop games. When they were playing in the knockout stage to qualify for the LAN event at Next, they actually had to play LGE.Huya and lost quite handedly. They took Gibraltar, which, granted, LGE looked pretty rough. It seemed like Bilibili had figured them out a little bit, and then they absolutely floundered. What was it? On Volskaya. BLG have a good core. I think they will be a good team if given more time. Is that time in the semifinals against a team that probably has something else prepared by this point? At least I'd imagine so. I don't think so. I think Bilibili's going to get opened up on, and I think it's very clearly LGE who takes this match. Even though they're rigid, even though they have one dimension, they're very, very good at it. So much so that they can beat the second seed, at least in the standings, in Gen G at Next. They handedly beat them 2-0. And I see them beating a lot of those Korean teams. I can't really say the same for Bilibili. They're very sloppy. Their resource management is not great. They're very passive in some of their later matches. I think you need to be a little bit more aggressive, especially at the Contenders level. I think you want to just play aggressive. I think playing this kind of jujitsu pull guard style, like, it doesn't make much sense to me. Like this NYXL, like, very passive. I'm not big on it, especially if your goats isn't like at that level. I wouldn't do it. I'd be very spearheaded. Just go in, focus this specific area, do this specific thing really well, and get your wins that way. And that's what LGE does, and that's not what Bilibili does. So that in mind, I have LGE 3-1. I think Bilibili's good for 1. I think they're good enough to take a map, whether it's not assault, but payload, whether it's control. I think those are the two game types that they'll probably find success on. But I have LGE making their first finals. I think they've made semifinals once previously, but breaking that curse. LGD T1W, this is a absolute stompage. I will say, as much as LGD can play up, T1W can play down. So there is a world where LGD probably takes a map, but I don't think it's likely. When it comes to Chinese teams, I'm very high on T1W let me rephrase that. In terms of matches, in terms of predictions, it's hard to bet against T1W. They might drop maps, though, I will say. I don't think it's necessarily likely, and that's why I have it as a 3-0, but there's a world where the LGD might be able to squeak one out. They have some magic to them, I will say. Playoffs, LGD will surprise you. This is a organization, not the same team, but an organization that has taken, some of the Contenders champions, very dominant champions, to game 5s, game 7s. So LGD might be able to squeak one, surprisingly enough. I don't think it's likely. I don't think it's necessarily going to happen, but that's why I have T1W 3-0. Very, very clean. Best to goats in China. They should coast over LGD pretty heavily. What I would like to see, if LGD can push T1W to pull out a strategy that they have had specifically prepared for the finals, that might be interesting. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So the playoff patch is going to be on the Baptiste Pass, so there's going to be a lot more Winston, assumedly. Granted, that hasn't really shown relevance in the Overwatch League like we assumed. I think a lot of pundits and experts had assumed that we would see a lot more Winston because of the armor changes and how Winston's cannon works on armor now. He does considerably more damage, but that's not been utilized as much. But what has been starting to see a little bit more use is Doomfist into goats. And when we talk about Contenders, they're not the best at goats, right? They're not the best in the world, and that's fine. But you can get away with a little bit more there. While you might not expect Sombra goats to be the best, like if you talk to European players and coaches, they think that Sombra is bad. But when you're playing against weaker teams that don't know what they're doing, some of these strategies can be a little bit better than you might expect. So when we see teams like Shanghai, like Guangzhou in the Overwatch League use Doomfist, and you have one of the better Doomfists, at least in China, I'd say in the world, on T1W in Media, you're going to see him play it. I'm pretty confident in saying you'll probably see them play him on Doomfist. You already see them actually play him on Doomfist, not Control, but I think that's going to supersede and actually bleed over into other game types because it is a little bit better. So if LGD can kind of pressure them into showing what they're doing in terms of Doomfist, if they're running a Doomfist, if they're running something else, that would be pretty interesting. But I think it's very clear T1W takes this convincingly. Maybe not what exactly shows on paper on my old graphic over here in graphic land, but convincingly, I think T1W wins. And then we have the final that everybody wants. It's LGE.Huya, the leader in Group B. In Group B, with a undefeated record, going up against the undefeated first seed from Group A in T1W, and this is where things get interesting. I have this T1W reigning victorious with a second title with a 4-2 victory. We have seen them play previously at the next qualifiers, which, again, you can put an asterisk on and say, how seriously were teams playing for this? Were they preparing for playoffs? Were they prepping? How much work went into playing in qualifiers? That's a fair assumption. That's a fair asterisk. That's a fair question, right? But in that same sense, we have seen them play. Regardless of those questions, T1W looked better than LGE, period. There was less mistakes. They seemed to be able to beat Sombergoats pretty handedly. LGE did not play well, I will say that much. LGE looked bad, not great. Still probably one of the better teams in China, but very messy, very uncharacteristic EMPs out of Haker. Haker kind of mispositioning at times. Some very questionable ult usage. They looked poor. Is that some sort of mental pressure that T1W puts on teams because they're so, touted as one of the better Chinese teams? It's possible, definitely so. But when we go into this match, you have a team, this is the kind of storied immovable object meets the unstoppable force, right? The immovable object is very rigid and holds their ground well and focuses on their one style, and that's LGE.Huya. They have the Sombra, that's their bread and butter, and it's their bread and butter, but they're very good at it, so you have to prepare in multiple different ways for it. And the unstoppable force is T1W. They have all kinds of different strategies they can throw at you. They can put Silver 3 on DPS. Name another main tank that can play DPS other than Ameng. Not too many. Not too many main DPS, main tank / DPS hybrids out there that can do that. And T1W knows that, and they'll flex. They'll put him on Genji. They'll put him on Doomfist. They'll put all kinds of different strategies together to really break you down and force you to adapt and really test you. They are kind of the gatekeepers for Chinese teams going into the Overwatch League. If you can't beat them, you're not going to beat any of the Overwatch League teams, right? Within reason. Florida Mayhem exists. That said, I think based on the patch, T1W's utilization of Doomfist, their cleanliness when it comes to beating Sombergoats focused teams, I have them beating them 4-2. I think LGE is good for a couple maps. I think they can take some here, there. I think they're going to get beaten, though. I think T1W takes another title. I think T1W is very clearly the best team in China. I like LGE. I think they're really, really good. I just need to see more from them. They're too rigid. They looked bad in the head-to-head at Next. It's sad to say. I haven't been too high in T1W in the past, but, kudos and credit where credit's due. They are the best team in China at the moment. But a quick little, and yes, this is a paintbrush, a quick little slight prediction. I think LGE is going to do better than T1W at Pacific Showdown. I think that they're a little bit more focused around their strategies. I think they're better at playing the mirror, which I expect a lot of the Pacific Showdown teams, depending on what patch we're on. I'm assuming we're going to be playing in the Baptiste patch with lots of Sombra. And I think LGE.Huya will have a good time in that mirror, whereas T1W is going to maybe struggle against the different looks that teams are going to throw against them. Again, they can kind of play down to their opponents at times. They can be a little bit emotional. And I think that LGE is going to have a better performance than T1W, even though they're differing in seeds, where T1W will be the first seed and coming out of China as representatives, and LGE is the second. I think LGE is probably going to do better than T1W at Pacific Showdown. So that is the primer for China. Be excited. I think it starts this weekend with the quarterfinals, so be on the lookout there. And here are my predictions. Yeah, thanks for checking out Chinese Overwatch and supporting them and supporting me. If you like the video, maybe check out some other ones. Maybe I'll put them down here. If you have any comments, responses, this, that, the other thing, let me know down below. Leave a comment and like and all that stuff, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next videos. Thanks for watching.